Well, it's summer garden tour time, which means it's also garden wins and sadly a couple of garden fails time. I'm going to take you through our summer garden and I'm going to show you the things that really worked this year and didn't work so well. So we are in zone 8A and it's midsummer, and I'm going to be honest, it's super hot here. It's about, I think our heat index this week and next week is around 110 degrees. So that has contributed to some of my garden fails, sadly, because some of the things I planted just are melting away. I'm going to show you a couple of those things. I feel like I was destined to have a garden in a climate that's a little bit cooler in the summer, but that's not what I have. And that's okay. We're doing the best we can. So there's some things that I absolutely love that we planted this year that I want to share with you that might help you in all of your garden design next summer. Okay, here we go. The bumblebees have decided to join us for our garden tour. Okay, so the first thing that we did a little differently this year was put in this structure for the dahlia bed. And I like it a lot. It's helped keeping all the dahlias from drooping over. But the second half of that is that this year we probably put out our dahlia tubers about 3 weeks later than we did last year. And this summer has been a lot hotter than last year. So sadly, my dahlias are just not doing as good as they usually do. Usually they're all super tall and they flowered profusely for at least like a month. But this year I just got them in the ground too late. So I'm taking a note in my garden journal and I'm going to plant them out a little earlier next year. So hopefully they can get some good growth and some good flowering before it starts getting so hot. They just do not like the hot temperature. We have drip irrigation in all the flower beds, so they're getting the water that they need. But when it's 100+ degrees during the day, literally they just kind of like melt over. So that's something to think about if you do want to plant dahlias and you live in the South. If you could get them in earlier, the better. A lot of people in the South don't dig up their tubers because it doesn't get cold enough for it to really affect them where we live. But I dig them up every year because I like to divide them. It just gives me more tubers. And I like to have kind of my growing collection of dahlia tubers. Okay, now I want to show you my limelights because I'm very proud of my limelights. So these limelights are probably about 5 years old. They're, as you can see, they're massive, and I cut them back every spring. This may be not the best location for them because they do get a ton of sun, and what I've noticed is that they start kind of browning on the tips. I come out most days and spray them, just to give them a little misting in the heat of the day if I'm home at that time of day. That's something that you can do if you have limelights in a more sunny and hot location. You can mist them in the heat of the day, and it helps to keep all the flowers not from burning. But I mean, some days I obviously can't do that, so we have some burning. But I am obsessed. Sometimes I just want to come out here and be like, oh, get into my limelights. If you want a really massive impact in your garden with a very little effort, I would say limelight hydrangeas are one of the very best plants that you can add to your garden. Okay, so another addition that we did early spring was add a couple more perimeter beds on this side of the garden and on the other side. I'll take you over there in a minute. And the main reason I did that was because I needed more space that was full sun. A lot of the garden, especially on the other side, is like half sun. And there's some flowers that I love that need full sun. Obviously, most flowers that I love need full sun. So we added this perimeter bed. We already had the irrigation in place, so it was the perfect spot for it. I still have a good enough walkway to come through right here to go to the raised beds. But it gave me the opportunity to add in this Verbena bonarensis, and I am obsessed with it. I want to just say, okay, so I'm 5'4". That's pretty, it's like 5 foot tall. And I love how it sways in the breeze. It does not get affected whatsoever by the heat and humidity in our zone 8A. And I just think it is so delicate and lovely, and the color is really, really pretty. Something to note about these, especially our local garden center where I usually buy all of my plants, didn't have them when I wanted to plant them out. They got them later in the season. So I actually ordered these and some of the delphiniums that I added to this bed, foxgloves and a clematis, from an online resource. And I'll be honest, when they came in, I was like, oh, those are so tiny. These verbena probably were only that tall when I got them in. And look how tall they are now. I only planted these out probably 2 months ago. So I created a little garden guide that I've linked below the video, and it has all of my favorite plant suppliers, seed suppliers, dahlia suppliers for the tubers, every gardening equipment, like all the equipment that's my favorite that I use every single year after year after year, seed starting supplies, all that stuff. I put it in the garden guide. It's a really helpful resource if you love to garden and you just want like quick access to all of my very favorite things. I will say that right now is the time to start planning for spring garden next year. I've already ordered all of my fall bulbs, tulip bulbs, and all the things for the holidays. I do paper whites for all of my family as gifts. So I've ordered all of those, and the narcissus, all that stuff. So grab the garden guide if you want access to all my favorite things. Okay, so this was a win. I am obsessed with this. This is Carolina jasmine, and this is the third year, I believe, for the Carolina jasmine. We planted it 3 seasons ago, and it's just now this year starting to really fill in on the gate and on the gate on the other side and some of the posts that we have them growing up. So I love the lush look of it. Obviously, it does flower earlier in the spring, but honestly, mine never gets a lot of flowers on it, just a few here and there. They're yellow flowers. Yellow, I would say, is a beautiful color. It's just not a color I have a lot in my garden. But the reason I did the Carolina jasmine is because it's beautiful and it's green all year long. I just like having that fresh green look on the fences. Okay, so this can be seen as maybe a win. I mean, it's beautiful. It's definitely a win, but it might also be a little bit of a conundrum for me. So this raised bed is where I have a lot of my English roses. They are on their 3rd blooming right now. There's only a few dotted in here, but I've got a lot of buds, and they'll probably bloom one more time after this. So I'll probably get, I think this is the 4th, 5th. I'll probably get five blooming cycles out of the roses because we have a long growing season here. Last spring, so a little over a year ago, I planted this Gara in the flower bed because I thought, oh, how beautiful it's going to be, kind of coming up and wispy in and amongst the rose bushes. Well, as you can see, it's nuts. It is completely taken over this flower bed, and I do think it's very beautiful, but what has happened is it's made it difficult for me to deadhead my roses and to kind of get down in there and see where I need to clip them back, because I try to deadhead all of my plants weekly. I just like to, a lot of mine are you know, like cut and come again flowers. So I want to keep everything deadheaded so that I can get more and more blooms throughout the season. Now, I will say this is definitely, if you want this wispy kind of English country garden look, I would add this to your garden. It has done extremely well in our heat and humidity. It grows very, very fast. It's a perennial. It's going to come back stronger every single year. This is Whirling Butterflies Gara. But one thing that I will say, a note of caution is that of what I found out, it doesn't love to be moved. So I am obviously going to have to move all these plants. I think there's 8 plants in this bed. And what I've read, I don't know this firsthand, but what I've read is that this Gara has a pretty significant taproot. So I may lose them when I move them. I don't want to lose them. I want to transplant them into my walkway in the front of the house, but it is what it is. Sometimes we win, sometimes we lose in the garden. I think this is both of those things. And then if they come back, if I don't break the taproots and I'm able to transplant them and they come back for next year, that's definitely a win. So on this side of the garden, I also had a big area in the center to put what I like to call a container island. And you guys have seen this before, but I wanted you to see it in full bloom. You saw it when I planted it out in the spring, but look how pretty it looks. And this is something great to do if you don't have a big garden. You can just group a grouping of pots together like this and create what kind of looks like a garden bed. So I've got a really tall one right here. This is probably, I don't know, 3.5 feet tall. And then I have varying size pots all the way around the tall pot in the center. I added kind of a little trellis, makeshift trellis that I created out of some branches that had fallen. And then within all of the pots, I have different plantings, but I repeated them, okay? So I've got some salvia. Obviously, the variegated ivy looks great in the summer, but it's gonna look good all throughout the entire year. It's been in this pot for probably 3 years now, so it's very vigorous and it looks beautiful. I love the variegated leaf as a backdrop against some of the plantings that's in the front. I've got dianthus. I've got this really beautiful euphorbia. This one's called Breathless, and I use it every single year. It does really well in the heat, and it just looks so delicate and cottage garden-like, and I love that look. I've added that in a couple of the pots all the way around. I've got salvia and creeping jenny and a foxtail fern, and I just kind of repeated those same plants throughout all the different containers to give some cohesiveness, but then to keep things really interesting. As you can see, my color palette for the garden is purples and whites and pinks, and I like a mix of different color greens, so I always try to add in either variegated vegetation or creeping jenny that has that kind of punchy lime green color. I just think all the different tones of green add a lot of depth to the garden. Now moving on to the steps, which is probably one of my favorite flower displays in the garden. So on each side of the step, I have like 7 pots, I believe. You can't even see the pots. But this is 7 pots on each side, all varying heights and varying diameters. And the hero this summer, honestly, is the petunias. So it's hard to tell, but the pot that's holding the petunia plant is right here. But what's happened throughout the spring and summer is these petunias have just cascaded down, and honestly, it's like a wave of curtain of petunias. It looks so beautiful. And something that I've learned this summer, because I usually don't use as much white or very light pink in the garden as I did this summer. And with our heat and humidity, what I realized is I love white in the garden, especially against the dark colors on our gate and all of our posts and everything that we have on our patio. It just pops and it brings a little coolness to the garden. So I think I'm gonna add more white next spring. But here we have the petunias. I repeated that euphorbia. This is actually a star jasmine, so it bloomed very, very early in the spring, but I still love it. I think it looks beautiful and adds a little bit of height to this container grouping. I repeated the salvia, and I've got some just different things over here, but for the most part, I repeated a lot of the plants that were in our container island. It looks beautiful. I will say the petunias, it's midsummer here, so they're getting a little leggy, and I probably will need to cut them back in order for them to look good for the rest of the season. I haven't wanted to do it yet because I do think it looks so beautiful, but if you looked kind of in here, they're getting a little bit leggy. So I may or may not do that. I don't know. But right now I'm loving it. I think it's beautiful. And if you have the opportunity to kind of put some containers on steps, you could even do it on your front porch if you've got steps down your front porch. This just looks beautiful. This grouping just looks like a mass planting, but it's actually a lot of pots. Gorgeous. Okay, let's go to the other side of the garden. Okay, so we're on the opposite side of the garden, and this side is a symmetrical size and shape as the side that we were just on, but it gets more shade. So I I have an opportunity to do some other kinds of plants on this side, but also in the heat of the summer, I would say if I come out here to have a cup of coffee or read a book, I generally sit on this side because it's not as hot. And that's always important in the summer, midsummer of the South. So I love to hang out at this table and chairs. This is where a lot of times I'll sit in the morning and have my coffee and just kind of enjoy nature. In the day, like in the heat of the day, if I want to come out here, this limelight hydrangea tree casts a shadow over this whole central area, so I can also sit at the table and not get too hot. Okay, so I didn't talk about this on the other side, but I wanted just to point it out because it's a really beautiful part of the garden, and that is how the wisteria frames both sides as you enter into the patio. So we've got some pretty good sized columns. I think we've got 8 of them on the patio, and on 6 of them that are closer out to where the sun would touch, we've got this wisteria trained to go up the posts. And then now it's starting to cover the header beam that's up top. And I just love it. It is such a beautiful, it creates like a really beautiful frame to the patio and just looks, in my opinion, very romantic. And I'm all about a romantic garden. So I wanted to point that out. This wisteria is Amethyst Falls. And I will say, one of the things that I am a little disappointed about with the wisteria is honestly, it just doesn't get enough sun to bloom profusely in the spring. It just doesn't, but it's still beautiful. The leaves are gorgeous. And in the fall and winter, the spiraling branches just add a lot of interest to the whole garden area. Now I want to show you the planters that are on this side. So as you can tell, this gets some shade. So I've got some double bloom impatiens. I love these. I think they're so delicate and pretty, and they just, as long as they stay watered, they look great all summer long. This is the first year, I know this is going to sound crazy, but this is the first year I've done any type of begonia, and they are just troopers in this heat and humidity. They've looked good all summer long. They're massive. And bonus, these I bought in the spring as hanging baskets. I mean, I always do that. That's a pro tip of mine, because a lot of times the hanging baskets already have different plants grouped inside of it, and you get a lot of bang for your buck. I think that these were like $30 a piece. They were massive hanging baskets. They had the begonias, and they have, you can't see it, but there's some ferns in there, some coleus, like there's all different kinds of things. And they look gorgeous, and they've lasted and lasted and lasted, and they'll last all the way through like frost. So they look great. The ferns over here on the side, these are actually ferns that I planted last year. And I just overwintered them in the garage. And they came back and they are loving life. And I'll just do the same this fall. I'll put them in the garage, and hopefully they'll come back next year and look gorgeous. So this is the perimeter bed that we added on this side of the garden. And this does get full sun. So I was able to add in some Shasta daisies. These are Becky, I believe. I did some coreopsis this year. I've never done coreopsis, but I really like it. I will say the only thing about the coreopsis is it is very, very meticulous to deadhead. The flowers are tiny. The little stems are tiny. And the new buds and the spent flowers are very, very intertwined. And it, honestly, I'm not going to deadhead them anymore this summer. It's a total pain, and it takes like 2 hours. So they're just going to have to thrive and live the way they are. I do deadhead the daisies, and this is one of those white flowers that has made a really big impact in the garden. They are prolific bloomers. They have just bloomed and bloomed and bloomed and bloomed all summer, and they'll continue to do so. So I might add more of those next spring. I think they look great. At the end of the bed, I have some bearded irises. They're of course very short-lived, but they're so beautiful. I think I'm gonna add some more to the garden next spring. And I just wanted to say, you've noticed that I've been carrying this around maybe. I mentioned this in a lot of my garden videos, but I just wanted to mention it again. This is my garden journal, and it has become probably the most important part of my gardening journey. I put all of the plants that I add to the garden in this journal. I take note of the different things that happen throughout the spring and summer and winter when we start our seeds, when specific pests come and live in the garden. We have really bad Japanese beetles. Luckily, the season is over. Hallelujah for that. I think I saw the last Japanese beetle, it's been about a week ago, but we have like a 6-week period throughout the summer where they come and they just munch on all of my flowers. And that season was 2 weeks later this year than it was last year. So I have that in my garden journal, and I know how to prepare for it and just like prepare my heart and mind for the beetles to come and eat all my flowers. So if you're starting a garden journey, I highly recommend you start a journal and just take note of the things that work, the things that don't work, how the sun shifts throughout the day, and what works best in your climate and in your garden. Okay, also, I've got to show this back here. So this is, this is a little garden trough that we added last summer, and it was a place where I put a lot of my seedlings. This summer, I thought it would be great to use as an herb garden, but I'm not gonna lie, I don't love it. I've got some basil. It's all bolted. I've got sage. I will say the rosemary has done really well because the rosemary likes a real free draining kind of gritty Mediterranean soil. Usually when I put rosemary in my raised beds or in the ground here in 8A, our zone, it doesn't do very well. It kind of dies, but it is thriving in this raised beds or this trough. So I will probably go back next spring to this being a little like place for seedlings to grow or additional plants that I don't have a place for in the rest of the garden. But I think I'm gonna keep the rosemary there because it's thriving. Okay, last are these 3 little pots, and I know they're not the most beautiful things in the world, but it's like my little experiment center. So I am an avid watcher of Gardener's World. It is a British gardening show, and I am obsessed with it. I watch it. It's like my downtime. So I have learned a lot about different plants that we don't necessarily have prolifically in the US because it's a British gardening show. So these little tiny grasses are Stepia gigantea, and I'm gonna put a picture of what this looks like when it's fully grown so you can see and understand why I want it in my garden. I ordered these. I could not find these anywhere in the US except for one random grower that was selling them on Etsy. So I don't know why we don't have them here, but they're so beautiful. They have the most gorgeous, tall plumes that are very feathery. And they have a really gorgeous, like golden color, and I want them so bad. So these came in, and I'm not kidding you, they were the most pitiful little, it was like 2 little blades of grass. I thought, oh my gosh. So I'm trying to, I planted them out originally into one of the garden beds, and they just did not do very well. They didn't have enough sun, I don't think. So I put them in this pot, and I'm trying to nurture them to grow a little bit larger this season, and then next spring I will plant them out. And then this back here, this is my mint. You have to put mint in a pot. I made the huge mistake one year of planting mint in one of our garden beds, and it took me like 3 years to get it all out. It just spread and spread and spread. So this is our mint for our mojitos, and it's in this little pot, and it's exactly where it needs to be, not taking over my garden. So let's just talk about the raised beds on this side of the garden. Couple of great things, couple of not so great things. So when we installed the raised beds 3 years ago now, I wanted something that was impactful, and I wanted to fill them. I didn't want them to feel like, you know, underwhelming, I suppose. So I added in some viburnum. So this one right here, I've got 3 viburnum here, and I've got 3 double file viburnum, which are tree forms on the other side. And they are beautiful. They are the very first thing in the garden to bloom in the spring. But what has happened is they've just taken over this bed. And so this is where I like to put my zinnias in the summer. And honestly, I just don't have nearly as many as I had in the past because they don't have enough room because these viburnum have taken over. So I'm gonna move these either this fall or early next spring, probably this fall, honestly, out to some garden beds that are in my yard because I need the space for flowers, and let's be honest, they're taking up all the room. Now the flower bed behind me, this is a perimeter bed, and in it I have the limelight hydrangeas, and I have a ton of echinacea. That is a native plant to Arkansas where I live, and the bees love the purple cone flowers, and they do great. They come back every year stronger and stronger. They're not picky. They've been blooming for months now, so some of them look a little spent, but I deadhead them, but very sparingly, because I love to harvest the seeds in the fall and plant new ones. We do that every single year. I've got a ton of small echinacea plants growing on the outside of the fence so that I can plant them out throughout the garden in the front. The deer don't really mess with them, so they're great for me to have outside of the fence. I try to do some propagation. We don't do a ton of it, but that is one that I do every single year. So I'm revealing all my secrets and showing you my least favorite part of the garden, which is this bed behind me. So this is a really weird spot in the garden because the limelights that are back here, they're gorgeous. They're massive. And they get a good amount of shade, but they also get really, really hot afternoon sun. So some of them are burned, but it is just what it is. It's where we live, and they look beautiful. I'm glad we planted them there. This raised bed is probably the one that gives me the most trouble because it really doesn't get a ton of light. And every year I think it's going to, and every year I'm disappointed with the plants that I put in here. So I've got some herbs on the end. I've got some holly topiaries that honestly need to be trimmed. They're getting a little crazy. And then I had extra dahlia tubers, so I put them in this bed. They're not doing well because they're not getting enough sun. So next year I am committed to figuring out some really beautiful flowering plants that I can put in this bed that need mostly shade, because that's kind of what this gets, especially in the middle of the summer. So I hope that me sharing the garden with you and also some of my wins and some of my garden fails helps you as you're planning your garden for next spring and next summer. Remember, gardening is a plan ahead situation. And when we think about what is working and what isn't working, and we take a little bit of time to put those thoughts into our garden journal, we're better prepared to have a more gorgeous garden the next year. Now, if you want to see what this garden looked like when I planted it out earlier this year in the spring, I want you to meet me in this next video. I'll see you there.